If you'll take a seat, this is the Economic Development and Tourism Committee, and this is a hearing only. So the sooner that everybody could grab them a seat, the sooner we could. And please, we've got a sign-up sheet on the front for those that wish to speak.
Cut that sales off.
And what?
Cut that cell phones off.
Oh yeah, please turn your cell phones off so we can hear our presenters, and we can either, those that are going to speak can either speak in front or at our podium, whichever you prefer. And again, this is the Economic Development and Tourism Committee. We have not been named yet, so we are essentially an ad hoc hearing committee. Most of us will be back, hopefully in this same capacity. Thank you, ma'am. I think Ron Fennell, we'll just get started right away, and you can either have the podium or the table, whichever you prefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, or soon-to-be committee, thank you for allowing us to take a few minutes to introduce you to some of the leaders in the Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association. Among the audience, we have the general manager of the largest hotel in the state of Georgia, the largest hotel between Disney and Opryland, Ms. Erica Qualls from the magnificent Atlanta Marriott Marquis, among others that you'll hear from in a moment. But what we wanted to do today is give you a thumbnail sketch of some of the issues we're going to be tracking this year. Obviously, there are tourism-related issues. It has been 24 years since I left being a member of this house. It's fun to watch you guys. Isn't it, Gerald? Hard to believe? I know. I'm still dazed by that myself. But the work that you continue to do on behalf of the people of Georgia is most appreciated, and we're thankful that you gave us a moment today to let you hear what's on our mind and what issues we're going to be following during the session, some of which will end up in this committee, others that will go to other committees, obviously. But I wanted you to be aware so that should those issues come up in conversation with your colleagues, that you would be able to address them. With me is the executive director of our state association, Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association, Jim Sprouse. And he has a few opening comments, and then we're going to introduce some of our team to you to give a thumbnail sketch of a couple of the issues. Jim?
All right, thank you. I wanted to thank the committee for your hospitality in having us here. Had to work that in. When we met at the governor's conference in August, or some of you were there was a lot of discussion about, in that case it was short-term rentals, and I promised that I would bring you some more information to that, and that's really part of this meeting today. We brought someone in from American Hotel and Lodging Association, Troy Flanagan, so he'll talk in just a few minutes. And we have some other issues that we want to share with you, and our members who live it every day are here to do that with you. As always, we like to have an open conversation with you at any time. Anytime we can assist you in any way, just give me a call. If you don't have my cell phone number, I'll give it to you.
I think it's on one of these cards.
It's on the cards. Mm-hmm. I'd love to host the committee for a back-of-house tour at any time at any of the properties. I'd like you to see the people behind the scenes who make a living, and they work here in Georgia, and those jobs can't go anywhere else. But we will be mindful of your time today. So we'll get our message across and get on. So next up.
Okay, I'll introduce to you Ron Tarson. He's going to join us and talk to you a little bit about, and Ron is the general manager of the Westin Peachtree Plaza Hotel. Many of you have stayed in that hotel and are frequent diners at one of the restaurants there. And I know he appreciates your patronage, but he wants to talk to you a little bit about the state's investment in tourism. Over the years, the state has made a major investment in our industry with the World Congress Center and all the iterations, Georgia Dome, et cetera, that have followed. And I think we've heard positive information coming out of the governor's office on a long-held issue for us, and that is tourism funding. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ad hoc committee members. Thank you for your time, and also thank you for your support for our industry. It's been great, and it clearly doesn't go unnoticed, so thank you for that as well. And Georgia tourism really is in great shape. We're almost $54 billion in economic impact, 411,000 jobs, 10%, a little over 10% of the private employment in Georgia, $2.8 billion in state and local tax revenue. Even in Atlanta itself, the driver of some of this, we had 45 million visitors in 2014, $13 billion and 230,000 jobs, and Atlanta was named one of the top 3 convention destinations in the country. That's excellent. But we can do even better. The Convention and Visitors Bureau wants to get to 55,000 visitors by 2020, which is 10 more thousand visitors, $3 more billion, and 50,000 more jobs, and about a little over $500 million of tax revenue. So to reach our potential, though, I believe we need to grow our current state funding levels, because every state is competing fiercely for this tourism dollar, and we're only reaching a fraction of our in-state and very little of our national and international reach. We're not investing in our future at the level or pace of other states. We're at 0.3% investment of tourism expenditures, which ranks us 48th out of 50, and our total marketing budget is 42nd. We're ahead of places like Nebraska and Delaware and Vermont, but we're behind every southeastern state. Savannah itself spends about half of the entire Georgia budget on marketing, and really any one of the downtown hotels spends about half of that budget on marketing. But we're asking for your support, not just because of our position relative to other states or our percentage of spend. We're asking for support because it'll drive business. Georgia has not nearly reached its tourism potential. Our competitors are taking advantage of our failure to invest in tourism marketing in a bigger way. If you turn on the TV, you're more likely to hear about other states and cities than you are about Georgia. And as a result, we're playing defense. And I don't think we should be having to play defense. We believe that Georgia is a far more attractive tourist destination than nearly all of the other southeastern states, but they're using their marketing dollars to make themselves look more desirable and reach more people. We shouldn't have to compete with Alabama or Memphis or Mississippi or Asheville. We have them beat city to city and state by state, point by point. We've got better attractions. We've got better universities. We've got small, charming towns. We've got the best airport in the country. We've got a great CVB network. We should be beyond competing with them. They're only competing because they're out there more and they're cheaper. If our story gets out in a big way, we can move up a league. We can compete with the bigger money cities and states, Florida, New Orleans, Houston, Denver, Dallas. And when we move up a league, we take in better groups, and they spend more money, and they stay longer, and everybody wins. That's our vision, and it's why we're asking for your support. Thank you.
Yeah, have a seat. Let him ask a question.
Are there specifics, not just to say we want more funding? Are there specifics that would help us to really go after that money?
Yeah, we're absent on television. I believe we don't do enough with our international passengers. We get how many 90 million people coming through Atlanta Airport, and they all need to hear about Georgia. And they need to hear about the places in Georgia, not just Atlanta, but they need to hear about the places we drive through, you can go to, attractions statewide. When you look at the TV right now, you'll see Muscle Shoals, and why is that out there competing with us? The other thing is for the group business, what's happening now is when we have to compete with the Memphises of the world and places who really aren't in our league, what that does is it drags down the rate and the spend, so we don't attract the great groups. I'd rather be fighting Boston and Chicago for the neurologists than fighting Memphis for the comic book collectors. So it's another way we can reach it. Also, sports marketing is another place we can go. Thank you.
And thank you again for that question. The governor's office has been spending some time on how we help, and the tourism division in the Department of Economic Development is constantly reminding the governor's office how much return on investment just a little bit of money provides to the state in real jobs and more visitors. So we're going to defer to the department on that, but we have our partners in our Convention and Visit Bureau community all across the state in all of your districts where we have hotels. We're promoting our destinations typically on very limited dollars, and it's from a specific source, the hotel motel tax primarily, but the state as a destination, we think since you've spent so much money on the facilities, ought to also enhance the ability to market the destination as well. And we're great partners in that respect, and it's been a good working relationship. We need more money, as they say. Yes, you have, sadly. I think Governor Deal has been very favorable of late, and I think fresh start this year. I'm looking forward to seeing what they are going to recommend, as we all are on Wednesday. The next issue, Brad Kahneman, if you'll join me. Brad Kahneman is the general manager of the Hilton Atlanta Hotel and has spent the past year as chair of the Atlanta Hotel Council. He now represents the Atlanta Hotel Council on the Governmental Affairs Committee for our state association. Mr. Kahneman.
Well, thank you very much. And as Ron said, we really appreciate everything that you do for us in the state. And I can to sort of use really, before we get to what I want to talk about for a couple of minutes, to really piggyback a little bit on what Ron said. It is a great time to be in Georgia. The sales are up, and I can tell you that many of the people that you have in the room here today, we spend a significant amount of our day really out talking to customers across the country, and there is a lot of buzz about Atlanta, and there's a lot of buzz about Georgia. And I've had the pleasure these last 2 weeks of last week I was at a leadership meeting in Chicago for Hilton, for the top 60 hotels within Hilton Hotels Corporation, and there was discussion about development and whatever else. And Georgia is right now really at the forefront of the minds of a lot of owners and a lot of people. They want to do business and transact business in Georgia because they look at it as from many places across the country as an easy place to do business with, an easy place to get building done, and they do see the attraction of lift and everything else that we have here in the state. With that, though, and we know obviously that tourism is at the cornerstone of driving a lot of that economic opportunity in the state, and but we from time to time are faced with issues and situations that we feel that we need to bring to your attention and talk about what potentially some of the ramifications of those actions are. And before us today, we've heard that that will be brought in for legislation this year is a bill both on the Senate and the House side discussing Religious Freedom Act of talking about religious freedom and finding ways to guarantee that some of that freedom is there. And we all believe in religious freedom, and we certainly all believe in what ultimately wants to happen with some of these bills. Our concern, though, is that the bills, as they're written, we're going to be perceived pretty negatively as we start to move out and talk to our customers across the country. And there will be some pretty significant impact that we're going to have to deal with that. And if we think recently, probably the closest situation that we had along these same lines was when we had the immigration bill that we had to deal with a couple of years ago. There certainly was some fallout and some impact in the community and the lodging community, and we had cancellations because of issues with that bill. All of them perceived issues. When you really look at the bill itself and the legislation that was there, it was innocuous, and there really wasn't the danger and the damaging, as damaging as some people would feel. But the problem with it is that it was perceived as a bill that was in some ways discriminatory, was in some ways was not making Atlanta and Georgia an easy place to do business. And we saw cancellations from that, and we're concerned that this particular bill will have, and some of the bills that are going to be brought out this year are going to have some of the impact for us. The bills will come. There'll be really two bills, and we had the opportunity to actually meet with Representative Teasley in December to talk to him a little bit about his bill and a little bit about some of the concerns that we've had with it. Also, Senator John Kuntz is going to have, McCoon is going to have a similar bill that's going to be coming through the Senate. And our request to you is that as you move forward and really start to think about these bills, that you use us as a sounding board, and that we can certainly talk to you in a little bit more in depth on what we're concerned about, the impact of this bill, and what it will have on, and what it will mean to us as we're out trying to attract business. And I'll leave you with, again, that we are bullish about the state, and really what we're asking for you is some assistance in helping us and being able to go out and fight the good fight in the marketplace. But understanding that many of our customers, from a perception standpoint, they're risk adverse. And when they have opportunities to decide where they're going to place business, especially large associations, they're going to go to the places where whether there's real issues or not, they're risk adverse, and they're just going to try and stay away from any PR problems that they can, and they're going to book someplace else. So we need some help in really moving and trying to find other solutions to be able to get to the end result that some of our legislators are looking for. And again, please look to us as a resource to assist and help you as we're kind of working through and talking through this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are some things that we surely, if we don't know now, we'll have to know. But one of the things that I know, we have a hotel motel tax. I'm not sure if all that comes into the general budget, and then some of it comes back to you in form of advertising, or all of it comes back, or do you have those figures as to how much comes in versus how much you get back? And you're smiling, so you can't wait to give me this answer.
The great part about being a general manager is we get to delegate, and Ron, tag you're in. So
I like a lob at the net. I appreciate it very much. And we'll talk about sports in a minute in a different light, and I appreciate that. The hotel motel tax, as you know, is a creation of the state in partnership with our local governments back in the early 70s, as we had discussion about the state investing in the World Congress Center, or what became the World Congress Center, and the ability to prime the pump. And the state did that. It was building a facility of a magnitude that will be able to lure large pieces of business to the city, and the state became the truest partner that any other state in the country at that time had. So it's a model that others have emulated. But we used a hotel motel tax as the structure by which we had a regular funding source to pay for that. As the hotel motel tax has evolved over the years, there are various jurisdictions with different needs. The horse park to the expanse in Tifton of our facility there, the Savannah Trade Center, you name it. There are opportunities all over, the Cobb Galleria Authority, the Stone Mountain Park. We have different methodologies by which that local tax dollar is split, but it all stays local. We do and have had discussions about how we take a fresh look at that, now 30, 40 years on, as to what that formulaic is and how that money is dispersed. But for specifics, it depends on the jurisdiction on how that money is split out. Usually, some jurisdictions give 100% of the hotel motel tax revenue over to their destination marketing organization or their CVB. Those are smart ones because they're investing in the future by putting the marketing dollars out there necessary to draw visitors to your destination. Others take a different tact, and they have facilities to manage, so they have to pay for bonded debt relative to the management of that facility. And if the facility isn't targeting the right market, sometimes it takes a little bit more of the money to maintain that facility. And I can give you offline some of those specific examples that we might want to take a look at down the road. But it is a local tax dollar generated and asked for by the Hotel Association. And our partners with the local government, we have a split for the first 5 pennies, as you know, that gives the bulk of that 60% to the local government to handle the infrastructure costs necessary to handle the increased visitor traffic that we bring. And thereafter, as you add an additional tax, a penny tax, it has to go to dedicated purposes and come through the General Assembly in order to do that. I hope that answers your question to some extent.
Thank you, and it does to some extent, but the money that you're requesting now over and above that is basically for advertising purposes, marketing?
This would be for the state's marketing budget. We would see none of it at the local government level except through the existing partnerships that the Department of Economic Development through its tourism division already gets. They get about $2 million a year in pure marketing dollars every year. We think they've done such an outstanding job with such little money in partnering with our CVBs to stretch that dollar that we believe they ought to have more money dedicated to that task so we can continue to leverage local government, or in this case the CVBs and the local government's partnership that they've had and do have.
Maybe one way to think about it that would help understand sort of where we envision this a little bit is using Atlanta as an example. You have 6 of the larger hotels, and we're spending our marketing dollars, and then within the ACVB for Atlanta, we're using some of those dollars to help us fund specific stuff for Atlanta. But what we do envision a little, and we talk about Georgia and whatever, but what we're really envisioning is really some help in the branding of Georgia, if you will, that we have money that we're going to be using so that when people are hearing Georgia, they get that feel-good feeling about Georgia. So it's a little bit easier when we're going in and talking about specific stuff, whether it be in Columbus or Savannah or Atlanta, that there's already a familiarity with Georgia and that kind of that feel-good piece that you have. So it's some of that branding message, I think, was really where we need some assistance and help to help fund that exposure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. As we go forward, the issue that he brought to your attention with the Religious Freedom Act just will be a resource to answer some of the questions, but how we book business in the state, particularly for the facilities like Cobb Galleria or Savannah Trade Center, how you book that convention business, and most specifically the Georgia World Congress Center. That facility has a marketing team, as do our hotels, as does the Atlanta Convention and Visitor Bureau, and they work collaboratively to win pieces of business. A couple of years back, 3 years back, this General Assembly allowed Atlanta to add an additional penny to go after some of the mid-sized convention market business that would be citywide opportunities. And we have added several dates in the course of a year. So if you had trouble getting a room last weekend in Atlanta, it's because we had a citywide sellout. We sold over 93,000 rooms in the metro market for a 3-day stint. Gift Mart, if any of you have attended that, you know what that is. There are other groups of business. January is going to be a very busy month, so there are going to be opportunities where I'm sure a couple of you will give me a call and say, hey, I can't seem to get in my hotel. It's oversold. What can you help me with? I get those calls, but just recognize that our job is to help generate more tax revenue to the state and local government to help continue to feed this opportunity, and it creates jobs for all those. And so when the meeting planner community, and it's a relatively small group of people, you can probably get them all in this room, that make the decisions on the 20,000 person attendee convention and up. You want to speak a little bit to that, since you deal with those people on a regular basis, just so they understand what a meeting planner market looks like.
Yeah, typically what will happen, especially for these larger, if you have a larger association group that's coming to Georgia or coming to Atlanta, the board, there's going to be a board, executive director, and a board of whatever that association is, but they're not in the business of necessarily booking meetings. So they'll have meeting planning companies and meeting planners that they hire to really help guide the selection process as to where they're actually going to be placing the business. So whenever we're winning a piece of business, we really have got a twofold piece and two relationships that we work on. One is the third parties of those meeting planners and getting them so that they're familiar with Atlanta and can realize why, if they make us the city or destination of choice, that they're going to look good in the eyes of their client, which is the association. The other piece, though, is the actual association itself has a board, and that board usually votes on placement as to where that particular convention is going to be. And that's where the perception piece really comes in, where you've got 7 or 8 people that are sitting on this board, and they have 3 or 4 cities or 3 or 4 destinations they're saying they're all going to work. And they're all voting, and sometimes the decision as to where they're placing a 20 or 30,000 person convention can fall as much as, oh, it's too hot there in this particular month, or it's further away from my house and it's harder for me to get an airplane from there as it is from another destination. So there's a lot of perception pieces and a lot of things outside of just that you've got the best convention center or the best airlift. Those are all important pieces of it, but there's a lot of other perceptions that are there. So from a marketing standpoint, for us to be able to sell some of those other pieces, and then certainly from a legislative side, when we're talking about individual pieces of legislation that can impact that perception of both that meeting planner and those associations, it can affect our ability to be able to book business. And for all of us to understand is that the group business especially, it's not just what we book this year for this year. We're booking stuff now, and decisions that we're making now for the next 2 to 3 years, or a couple of years, are going to carry us through the booking pace for the World Congress Center and some of these other places for the next 5 or 6 years. So decisions as we make those are going to really have economic impact on the hotels and on the cities and on the state, really for long term, for more than just the immediate time frame of the last year or two, or next year or two.
Just a couple of quick things.
Sure.
First of all, you talked about a general overall approach to branding for the state of Georgia. Are you talking something along the lines that, I don't know, a number of years ago, the islands to highlands, we had it all, we have it all sort of thing?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, or Georgia on my mind, that
Yes.
sort of thing?
Perfect.
Okay. So, I mean, basically what you're doing is, I represent a rural district, so I have a lot of tourism. I have a lot of agritourism with the wineries and things like
Yes.
that. So what you're doing is, it's a general concept about the state as a whole.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. And then this may be way off base, but when you get a group in here, do you have any statistics as far as repetitive people coming back, deciding, where are you looking as far as if once you get them here, do they tend to come back? Do we have any type of numbers or whatsoever to show us on that?
We do, and I'm sure the ACVB would have those numbers, and we could get those numbers and supply them to you. Anecdotally, I can tell you from a Hilton standpoint with Honors, our preferred Honors customers, that we see that all the time, that we have customers that are coming in for a convention, and that even while they're here, they're already booking for the next time that they're coming to town.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to see a return on investment,
Right.
see if there are any numbers for that.
And what we also see is that when we get them here, that they use this as sort of the beginning of a step off for an additional 2 or 3 days that they're spending to see other things that they're in the state. So why they, especially for our international customers, once they're here, what we then see is that they're going to Savannah or they're going to some of the other places.
Hopefully they're going to northeast Georgia, but thank you, sir.
Thank you.
As far as numbers go, at a future meeting, if the chair wishes, we could bring in, our friends across the state, each of the CVBs that you work with. GACVB has a repository of data, and each of these CVBs know their customers, and they know what repeat customers they have. They know the marketing that has worked. They know their target market pretty well. The ACVB has a wealth of data, and we'll be more than happy to blur your eyes with data that shows how this works all across the state, from the farm wineries that are such a popular destination in Georgia. I remember when we took Representative Parrish up there when he chaired this committee many years ago, and we were just a burgeoning industry, and the destinations have taken off over those years because the state was paying attention to trying to let the world know that we had this asset, and we just have to be able to tell the story. It goes back to our first question about having adequate funding to tell our story, because it is a great story to tell. How many of you heard of the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail? I grit my teeth every time I say that. We have more golf courses, better golf courses, more access, more amenities nearby, more hotels, and a better way to get to all of them. We just don't have a marketing fund to pay for telling the story. than does Alabama. So that's a different story for another day, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned earlier your concern about the Religious Freedom Protection Act and that it would hurt business. A few years ago, when I first got in the legislature, we heard from a lot of folks that if we passed an illegal immigration bill, that it would hammer our tourism here in Georgia. And I wanted to know if you have any numbers that look, now you have some data there. You can look back and say, did the passage of that bill hurt us? Okay, because I hate to say it, but we kind of hear this a lot, that, oh, you guys shouldn't do that because this will hurt us, and well, that will hurt us, and this will hurt us. And do you have any hard numbers to back up that the passage of the bill dealing with illegal immigration, what kind of impact did that have on us, on tourism?
American Association of Research Executives. It was a group that, I'll give you one example. It was a group that both the Marriott and us were co-joined for. As soon as that bill hit, that one particular piece of business canceled, went to San Francisco, and with it went $2.5 million worth of business and went out the door. And we had a week that went empty, and so we could certainly, with that, provide significant.
And the reason I ask is, tourism, as you know, is our second biggest industry.
Yep.
So, with all due respect, $2 million out of multiple tens of billions is not a. I guess my point is, sure, there are going to be people, as you mentioned, there are a number of factors that go into people deciding whether they're going to take a vacation here or come and do business with Georgia, and so. I'm interested in what that number really is.
We could absolutely get you not only what that full number is,
thank you,
but what we'd like to also do is have some discussion with you about our business and the business cycle of our business. Mm-hmm. And some of it's about timing as to when some of this stuff hits. And where we are in the hotel cycle right now is we're at the top of that cycle. Mm-hmm. But what we're booking now is really groups that are going to help potentially carry us through the downward portion of our next cycle, and it's always going to come. It always does.
Yeah.
And really, with the immigration bill, when that one hit, if you can't be good, be lucky sometimes. And really, with that one, what happened was many of the cancellations, there were some of those that we were able to fill just because we were on the upward tick of the demand cycle. And so there was some ability to be able to do that. We'd love to be able to have some opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about that dynamic and what that's going to mean to us, again, long term, as we're talking to the next, not just the next 6 or 12 months, but really the next 5 or 6 years. I look at myself as a reasonably good sales guy, and if we get a cancellation for the short term, we're going to figure out a way to be able to make that work. But what does concern me more is the long-term piece, and I would leave you with that the concern to it is that right now where we are in the development cycle, hoteliers and people that are building hotels, right now is when money is starting to free up and capital is happening again, and people are starting to build and buy hotels again. And so now is not probably a really good time for us to be doing anything other than being perceived as the most welcoming place in the country to come and do business and to come and build hotels.
But as you know, sir, we have, the economic impact of what we pass is a huge consideration for us. But there are many other considerations. And I understand your comment about the timing, but we meet 3 months a year, so that kind of limits our timing when we deal with this. But I appreciate that, and I would love to talk with you more about some real numbers. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Mr. Brockway. We look forward to continuing that discussion about impacts of those individual cases. And the $2 million you referred to in this one loss case for one client, that's how much money the state spends on marketing the destination right now. So it's not an insignificant number. In that context, it is in the overall state budget, and we recognize that. But again, we're laying bricks to a wall here that we're all a part of, and it's a key element, and I appreciate you raising the issue. It's an important one to be addressed. I'm going to go out of my order just a little bit and bring James Tismanakis up here for a moment, because I want him to talk about, since we were talking numbers, I'll let James go next. Thank you. And what we want to talk a little bit about is an issue that the chairman and I have spent a couple of years talking about, and that is an idea that we borrowed from another southern state. Texas actually came up with an idea on sports marketing, and we don't have a bill yet, but there's one in the offing. It's an exciting opportunity. Many of you that I've spoken to in the past year or so about it find it to be intriguing for your destination. And so I want to introduce you to talk about the concept. James Tismanakis, who is the CEO and Executive Director of Discover DeKalb, which is the entity that is their destination marketing organization, or CVB, as you would know.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for allowing us to be here and speak. And it's quite fun because the first three speakers have been so heavily on tourism, and the follow-up, because sports marketing is one of the fastest growing areas of tourism. It is a major economic impact for the state and for the destination. If we could create the Georgia Sports Marketing Fund, what it does is it actually gives more of a leveling field where Georgia can compete throughout the South, or Georgia sports compete nationally. And the other thing it really does is it allows the smaller communities or the smallest community to be on a competitive basis, if you can compare competitiveness against an Atlanta. So this fund would actually allow the little communities or the middle communities to bid on state tournaments, national tournaments, where many times smaller bureaus, sports commissions don't have the funding, because it's a fact. You have to bid on sporting events. So you have to put in seed money, bid fees, pay for them to bring the tournament to your community. And you have to pay for it usually up front. So the smaller convention and visitor bureaus, or even the mid-sized ones, doesn't always have the money to put in for the bid fee. So if you could create the fund that would allow us to go to the state with a set criteria on the economic impact, the number of rooms, what the return on investment will be, to help us to be able to provide the bid fee. And it's a win-win scenario. If the destination does not win the tournament, there's no money coming from the state. And if we do win the tournament, then the economic impact from the hotel rooms, but not just the hotel rooms. When sports comes in, as in tourism in general, you have the hotels, restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, retail, on and on, besides the positive experience that coming to the area brings. And we talked about golf, Robert Trent Jones. I mean, we've done several golf tournaments. It is a major impact to the area. So sports is a win-win scenario. The other thing with sports, if it's a youth sport, which is one of the main areas you want to go after, it brings mom and dad, brother and sister, grandma and grandpa, friends. So that's more economic impact, more exposure to the area. So your assistance in providing a fund would really help the smallest to the largest, whether it's down in the Valdosta area to the wine country, to us, to Atlanta. So it is something that would really be beneficial to move Georgia forward. Thank you.
I'd like to bring up our next to last presenter, Troy Flanagan. He's flown in today from Washington. He is the Executive Vice President for State and Local Government Affairs for the American Hotel and Lodging Association, to talk about one of the issues that you might have been hearing whispers about, but he has some details that might enlighten you about the issue. Troy.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here today. As he said, it's an issue you probably heard a lot about or seen clips in the news. I brought some examples of the news clips. I'll pass those around afterwards. But thanks for inviting me here. Glad to be able to come and talk about an issue that's important to us. The American Hotel Lodging Association, we work very closely with our partners around the country, including Jim here in Georgia. We're the association that represents 1.8 million employee U.S. lodging industry. Our membership is made up of owners, real estate investment trusts, the chain members, franchisees, management companies, and the state associations also are members. In Georgia alone, we employ over 39,000 workers at just under 2,000 separate properties. I want to talk to you guys today about the short-term online rental marketplace. There are obviously short-term rentals throughout the country and have been for years, but with the advent of some new technology platforms, we think that it deserves a closer look. First, I want to make it clear that the AHLA does not fear competition. We welcome new platforms that enable our members to distribute room nights to the traveling public. However, we hope today's conversation focuses on the inequities that our members face between our members and the short-term online rentals in respect to Georgia state and municipal law. Our members compete fiercely against each other every day, which drives innovation to improve the guest experience. However, while AHLA members compete with each other on a level playing field, new short-term online rental companies skirt rules and regulations meant to protect guests and communities in order to get an unfair and, in many jurisdictions, illegal leg up on our members. It's been suggested that our members simply fear innovation. I'd like to assure you that nothing could be further from the truth. The competition for customers between our members drives our industry's significant job creation, and we welcome short-term online rental companies and believe their presence will only result in improved offerings for potential guests. With that said, all of our members have several operating standards in common. They are all required by law to provide safe, sanitary, and secure environments for their guests. This includes clean sheets, hot and cold running water, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, fire escape plans, just to name a few. The rooms they rent are considered a retail business. This classification requires that our members collect and remit occupancy and sales taxes to the state and to the cities in which they are located. Thirdly, our members' properties undergo some level of state and or local zoning assessment to ensure they're in line with their surroundings and preserve the character of residential neighborhoods. Many short-term online rentals made possible through new technological platforms do not follow these basic rules and regulations. Our position is that property owners who rent their homes or rooms through Airbnb, HomeAway, FlipKey, or similar services are in the same business as our members and should be required to play by similar rules. Second, the lack of regulatory structure for a short-term online rental market poses a threat to the welfare of guests and the broader community. AHLA members operate in a regulatory structure intended to protect guests and neighborhoods through a variety of safety and zoning laws. Consumers expect protection, but the current regulatory structure puts short-term rental hosts and guests at risk from a variety of physical and economic harm with few avenues for recourse. I'm not here to advocate for any specific rules or regulations, but what AHLA expects is for businesses clearly competing with us in a similar business model to operate within a structure that provides protections for guests, keeps the lodging industry in the good graces of communities, and ensures competition in a truly free market. As we speak, lodging industry employees are checking smoke detectors, sprinkler systems, and fire extinguishers here in Georgia. Door lock checks are taking place, first responder systems are being reviewed, and health and safety inspections are being performed by state and local agencies. Furthermore, a hopeful franchise owner is likely applying for permits and notifications that will allow him or her to develop property for lodging and thereby create jobs. These processes, regulations, and guidelines are in place to ensure our members provide the best, safest experience for their guests and surrounding neighborhoods. Conversely, short-term online rental companies follow no similar guidelines. Most notably, there's no process in place for becoming a short-term online host. As many of these companies like to say, anyone can be a host. This is very concerning to us, and the lack of consumer protections and proper oversight should be concerning to lawmakers and regulators alike. Furthermore, there's a disturbing trend taking place across the country and likely here in Georgia as well. Developers are buying up multi-unit properties such as apartment buildings with the sole purpose of renting them out on a short-term basis. These are in fact hotels, illegal hotels. New York's Attorney General just last October found that a large slice of the money earned from short-term online rentals in New York City, just to use an example, came from a small cohort of developers that controlled numerous properties. 6% of hosts in New York City controlled 37% of the 25,000 properties that were for rent on any given night in New York City. So I think that shows that it's a commercial operation and not simply folks occasionally sharing a room. This flies in the face of safety and zoning laws. Neighborhoods should not be subjected to the possibility of being overrun by illegal hotels. Last, let's be clear that the short-term online rental marketplace is not a small burgeoning business model. Several of the largest short-term online rental companies are valued in the billions of dollars, making them larger than many of our own members. This is a big business, and it's important that the committee recognize it as such. Our association believes it's also important to distinguish between individuals who are in the business of consistently renting out rooms and those who simply rent out rooms on the rare occasion for a special event, such as when Atlanta hosts the Super Bowl or during the Masters. If you're renting out rooms on a regular basis, you're in the lodging business, and you should be treated as such. Short-term online rentals, by skirting Georgia tax law, rob the state of due income that enables the state to provide basic services to taxpayers. With a business model that encourages users to operate in regulatory limbo and avoid paying taxes, any benefits for the state of Georgia associated with short-term online rentals will disappear in the long run as they persist in operating outside Georgia state and municipal laws that clearly apply to them. All businesses, not just our members, must follow rules and regulations, and the short-term online rental companies should not be exempt from them. AHLA believes the growth of the short-term online rental marketplace presents an opportunity to ensure a fair, free market for lodging services across Georgia and ensure all businesses that contribute to the state's economy are able to succeed. Thanks for your time, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
I'm sure there'll be a lot. My first one is City of Savannah just passed an ordinance, and I guess my first question is, how do you enforce it? And believe me, I'm a firm believer in leveling the playing field. We did the very same thing to the auto industry just 2 years ago, whenever we used the title fee to eliminate those skirting, bringing thousands of cars into the state so they could eliminate paying the sales tax, which is 7, 8, even more % advantage. I guess one question is, what is the total amount of taxes, hotel, motel, sales, everything that you pay that creates a competitive disadvantage to the hoteliers versus the person who just wants to rent out their home on a short-term rental? And what is a short-term rental?
Well, I'll address it what I can. I mean, short-term rental by itself that's somewhat the definition of lodging. I mean, that's what we do. When we refer to the short-term online rental marketplace, we're more referring to the websites and phone apps that have popped up in the last few years that enable essentially anyone to very quickly and very easily rent out a room in their house, or, as I mentioned, someone who may have a set of properties and they've decided to fully put that into online rentals through one of those websites. By doing that, those websites don't have a mechanism for collecting taxes. Those are not treated in the way that our members are, whether they're a small bed and breakfast or a large hotel. There is a large portion of that business that is commercial lodging, traveling public business that is not meeting the same standards that we have to meet. I think some of the early examples we've seen where this is really causing some pain. I mean, as was mentioned in one of the previous speakers, hotel occupancy is at pretty high numbers right now. So it's hard to illustrate the effect on a major convention hotel. But when you talk to bed and breakfast operators in Savannah, or we've done some work in a few other states, that's where they're truly feeling the effect of this, because a bed and breakfast is likely to be in a residential neighborhood already, but the neighbors know that they live next door to a bed and breakfast. There's signage. They've gone through zoning. They collect taxes. They've often have to meet certain safety requirements, such as carbon monoxide detectors, sprinklers, ADA ramps, things of that nature. But if someone in the house next door in a historic district decides, well, I don't want to go through the process of turning my home into a commercial B&B, I'm just going to turn the whole thing over to a website and charge a cheaper rate because I have less obligations, they can do it with the flip of a switch, and they are doing it. And there are examples of some of those smaller properties going out of business already.
Are there any states that have passed legislation that would...
To my knowledge, there are no statewide laws that have been enacted. There are probably 15 or 20 that are going to take a serious look at it this year. Some of your neighboring states, Florida, North Carolina, I know are going to take a serious look at this. Some of the news clips that I'll distribute talk about how this is being talked about. I also have some clips from the Savannah example. What we are seeing is that A lot of cities are tackling this, and it's a different way of viewing it. In Savannah, it had to do more with residential zoning and parking issues. Some of the bigger cities across the country are looking at it from an affordable housing issue. When you've got a city that already has high rental rates, and someone buys an apartment building, kicks out all the long-term renters, or lets their leases expire and turns it into a hotel, you've just taken away housing stock from an already tight market and turned it over into a hotel that's not paying taxes.
How much revenue are we losing? Does anybody know?
I don't have numbers for Georgia. It's frankly, it's very hard to quantify. The best example, I think the best data, and you could probably try to extrapolate it and see how it applies to Georgia. But the only reason I referenced the New York Attorney General's report from last October was because that was the first investigation of this emerging industry that actually used subpoenaed data from one of those websites. There have been estimates produced for news publications or city council meetings throughout the country to talk about what they think they're losing. But that report actually got into one of the data of one of the websites, Airbnb, and produced a report that said that I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $76 million a year just for the city of New York, which is a big city, obviously, and it has a tight market, and it's a very popular service. But it took a pretty in-depth investigation to really find out or estimate what they're losing.
Representative Brockway.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm thinking about how do we tackle this issue, and maybe you can help me understand. If I decide I want to open up a bed and breakfast, I take a house and set it up. Is there like a different set of regulations that I have to follow than, say, your average commercial hotel? Or can you talk a little bit about that? Because I hear what you're saying about buying apartment complexes and using these websites to do that. But a lot of them are still just folks with an extra room. They're going to be gone for the weekend or whatever and rent it out. Can you what kind of regulation differences are there in those type of situations?
Yeah, I'll let you speak to the state of Georgia.
Pretty much as varied as there are jurisdictions, but for the most part, there are basic tenets. Number one, it's a commercial enterprise that needs a commercial business license. Number two, there's an inspection modem that goes along with this, that you have to follow certain basic setups. As he pointed out, whether it's smoke detectors, whether it's a sprinkler system, or so that we know that the house is safe for a public use. And then there are the ADA requirements and compliance issues relative to that, setbacks, parking, et cetera. What we're hearing a lot of is noise ordinance violations, and that was one of the components of the Savannah solution. Right now, there are over 450 Airbnb listings in Savannah alone. They're well over 1,000.
It's a popular
within
place.
A couple of miles of where we're sitting. They're well over 1,000. You can just search it, and it pops up. So it's continuing to grow as an opportunity. We had this discussion, almost identical discussion, about accountability a few years ago when we were dealing with the online travel companies through the Ways and Means Committee and dealing and trying to wrestle with the specificity around the tax question alone. And that was only for the hotel motel tax. Local governments are wrestling with the sales tax, and of course the state has a stake in that. And the online travel companies told us at that time, well, we're a virtual company, we're online, we don't actually live in a jurisdiction, so we don't fall victim to those kinds of things like laws and rules in your jurisdiction because we're online. And Chairman Stevens asked 4 questions. The first one was, do you have any employees here? No, sir. Do you have an office here? Well, technically, no, sir. We're in a virtual world. We're online. The third question was, do you transact business technically in Georgia? And the answer was, well, technically, we're virtual and we're online and that sort of thing. And so the last question that Chairman Stevens, I thought, was instructive to the lobbyist for, at that time, one of the online travel companies is, do you realize this is a Georgia tax writing committee and we're here to talk about Georgia taxes on taxpayers in Georgia? Why are you here? And with the thud, that ended their argument. And it's the same. This is a similar model that takes it to the next level. But local jurisdictions are being impacted because they have additional police responses they're getting to noise issues or parking issues or things of that nature. But more importantly, the traveling public deserves safety when it comes to a public accommodation. And there are no background checks. There are no insurance policies associated. it's technically not a commercial venture in their eyes. And I think the way the chairman put it and the way Savannah's dealing with it is make it a level playing field. If everybody has the same inspection regimen and the qualifications and pay the same fees and are remitting the tax accordingly, it's a competitive world. Bring it on. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing because you've got the younger generation, the millennials, so to speak, this type of sharing economy. They have no, I'm sorry, to go to a stranger's home and say, well, I'll spend the weekend, and that little freaks me out a little bit. But this younger generation, that is no thought, no worry about that at all. And I mean, we're going to address these sorts of issues a lot in the coming years. This technology just blows these things up and makes it. Folks are going to find a way to get what they want to get. So, thank you.
I would just add to your point about bed and breakfast and the way they're regulated. It does, as Ron said, it varies greatly by jurisdiction. But there are generally stipulations that if you have 4 or more rooms, or you're in a residential neighborhood, or the innkeeper lives on site, or you provide a meal, there are things like that that help to define that. And if you're, as I said, if you're a neighbor of a bed and breakfast, you know it. But if you're the neighbor of a house that's been turned into a every single day of the year rental property, you just moved into next door to a B&B, and you didn't have an opportunity to say whether that was a good idea.
One more question. We're running out of our hour, so Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Buzz's question was a lot of what I was going to ask too. Thank you, Buzz. And but as far as the taxes, I mean, my wife and I went on a trip recently with another couple. They were a little younger than us, a little more higher tech, I guess. And we did this VRBO kind of rental thing, and we were in another state, and I noticed that we did pay taxes there. I just pulled it back up, and it was that recent, and I could find where they charge taxes and so forth. Are we not doing that in Georgia?
Well, the VRBO market is a whole different thing. It technically is lodging short-term rentals, much like our hotels are. In fact, I think Marriott Corporation might be the largest VRBO in the world. So they comply with all the rules. They do the inspections. They do the business license. They comply with all of that. So that's not what's at issue. It's a personal home that people are renting out on their own through this online booking engine that takes that to the marketplace, sells your opportunity, but there is no connection to compliance with local jurisdictional norms, rules, taxes, or anything through the website.
Okay. Yeah, I get you now.
Okay.
That makes sense. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I want to get to Karen, if at all possible.
All right. Thank you. There are a lot of issues that we share in common with the Georgia Restaurant Association because we're all serving the tourist market. And I'll just mention a couple of them. Of course, we've talked about hotel motel tax, but alcohol, minimum wage, transportation, getting our workers to and from, and tax reform will have an impact on us. But she has some specifics around those issues that are current that will be helpful for you to learn about. Karen Brammer, Georgia Restaurant Association.
Thank you, Ron. And this is I'm here to speak today about, thank you very much for the opportunity today. I'm here to speak about the proposed religious legislation, the religious freedom legislation. And there are many times where we are walking singly on different issues, the restaurant industry, but this is definitely one of those issues that I think we collectively work together on. And Ron gave a lot of great statistics, and all of the hoteliers did also. And I would just like y'all to reflect on our industry and a couple anecdotal issues. Our industry employs over 400,000 people in 16,000 locations. Last year, our revenue was $16.5 billion in the state of Georgia. We represent 10% of the workforce. We estimate that somewhere between 28 and 32% of our revenue is generated by tourism. So there are many tourism issues that are very important to us, and particularly the issue of religious freedom. And the association, we are very proud of our richly diverse restaurant community. We serve and employ in our state. We foster a welcoming dining experience for all who visit and oppose any unnecessary legislation that conflicts these measures, thus portraying Georgia as an unwelcome state. And I will ask you to reflect back to last spring in Arizona when Senate Bill 162 was passed, which was the Arizona version of this same piece of legislation, that the outcry on that legislation being passed, Governor Brewer was in Washington for meetings and had to leave Washington, go back to Arizona to veto the bill because the NFL was threatening to pull the Super Bowl from Arizona. So I just ask that my industry is an industry of small business people. You look at a lot of large chains like Chick-fil-A. Those are all individually owned and operated. And we always ask for your wise guidance on how you're going to deal with small businesses here in Georgia. And so just please take that under consideration. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions of the committee? Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity.
Yes.
And the members of the committee. I hope you all get appointed to this committee formally.
Yes, 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 yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will. This concludes our committee hearing today of this ad hoc committee. So thank you for coming.
Good stuff. Good figures.